The night of 30 Tet cuts out cutting meat, covering the small village located close to the foot of the mountain of firecrackers, echoing from a far end in the air is the smoke of occasional smoke from the breathtaking tables of the first bright houses of the hammer, prepared for the moment of communication between the old and the new year. But at the end of the village, in a small house collapsing the air, Tet is completely opposite in that house. Mal, a 12-year-old orphan, who is collecting in the corner of the shaky little hands, embracing the old jacket to fight against the cold piercing bone. He has no hope for this Tet, because since his parents died in a Tet traffic accident with men are only quiet days enduring the cold and despised from Nam to live in his uncle's house. After losing his parents is the only relative left, but also the person whom Nam has always felt the cold and distant since the day he came here. And his wife did not consider him a member of the Nam family. Treated as an outsider, even a burden of his early days, trying help everything in the house so that no scolding, but whatever he does and never received back. Compliment just a small mistake. Nam was blamed event that evening when the whole family was busy preparing New Year's meal, was tasked with picking up the tray on the altar of small hands coldly, because the cold price carefully lifted the tray, but the only a step sliding the tray onto the floor of elaborate cakes on the ground. A chatter sound of the loud ruined the quiet space. Miller faced shivering each cake in panic eyes when hearing the puffed footsteps of this useless boy. You know how important these cakes are, but you also cause such painting as this is true food to harm the guts, full of angry eyes with others in the house watching, no one speak up his voice, even sighing his head with contempt and shaking his burden. I told him long ago to let it just bother me now, and see it all night 30. But also not with it, gnashing his teeth, as if adding oil to the male's uncle fire. Looking at him, the eyes filled with contempt, he stepped south to grab his arm and pulled hard, even though he cried enough pain. And tonight you don't need to be here. Get out of my house right away from me. At the cold voice that made the whole house unable to believe in his ears, his eyes opened tears. The uncle said tonight, what he stabbed the voice trembling. New Year's Eve, what this house is not there is a place for you to go. Don't let me see your face again. Throw some old clothes into a bag off Abrick, shoving some extra money and throwing south. He bowed down and picked up the bag of cold fingers, trembling. Heck knew he had no right to beg. Nam to look around his lost eyes, looking for some sympathy from the rest, but all was silence, and the cold gaze opened up the cold wind carrying the pain of tearing south foot out of his house, looking back at the last time, but the door was quickly slammed behind his back. Hess stood there in the middle of black night, seeing small shoulders trembling because of the cold, and because tears constantly falling, the cannon from a distance ringing, but with the male sound is no different than the bells signaling. A bitter beginning, wherever South walked towards the road, leading out of his village through the lighted house. Sharth the laughter of the warm scent of the pot of bread, but all makes the loneliness in his heart become more deeply he thinks of the parents. Sold Tet was the warmest time of 5 pictures of his mother preparing to hold him in. Hand-watching fireworks all appear as a distant dream that he could never touch anymore. His little feet taking him out of the village towards the city, the colder the night, but Nam didn't stop him doing anything, but knowing where he was going to go back to that house was impossible. To the shoulder bag is all he had, and in the dark he whispered to himself he had to live at all costs. Step into the city when it opened, the whistle of a horned car lights and the flow of people rushed to make him feel small. The city is not a special welcome place for an orphan boy like South. He has no money-free relatives, nor knows where to start. The canvas bag on his shoulder is all the property he carried, but in his heart still a ray of hope. Even the early days of South wandering the streets looking for a temporary spot in the awning Sorbridge in the morning. He sat by the road of eyes, followed those who passed by, hoping someone to stop helping. But life in the city is colder than he thought. People were not interested in a thin boy who sat in the corner of the street. Hans boldly asked for food but received only a despised eye or words. Disturbed away from the street fro. Hunger for the first 2 days of the night to the crushing into each coat made him trembling under a street along the road, trying to forget the hunger, but the hungry stomach calling once and for all. Stand closed his eyes in a dream of male seeing his mother, see his warm hand smelled hot rice. He used to make every night, but when he opened his eyes all was only the 3rd day of the day. Male decided to find himself to go along the roadside eateries from a distance. Smell the smoking of the last smoked food. He risked entering a small pho where the boss was standing after rush hour, bowed to meet the urgent voice. Uncle, give me a bowl pho. I will wash the dishes, to help me do anything just to eat. The owner of the bar turns to look at him. The eyes of Mr. Tho Min show suspicion. But then, when seeing the skinny face of big black eyes filled with the suffering of the man who nodded and finished eating here, wash the dishes, help me to gladly, tears fussy, he hastily filled with hot water and flushes in the heart after meals. He shook hands on his clever little hands, working very quickly without leaving any bowls. Seeing he worked hard, the owner decided to let him stay on the dishwashing job every day in exchange for rice in a small sleeping place behind the kitchen. Feeling lucky and grateful, not only for food but also for his uncle, to escape the street wandering. Despite the hard work, Nam always tried his best. He knew this was the only chance he had to survive. One evening while cleaning, Mail caught a man selling old books at the corner of the market near the white-gray man's shop. The face of the gentleman arranged each book on the old trolley, curious near the eyes, staring at old books but still intact. The old man raised his head, smiling. "I like to read books." Nam nodded hesitantly and replied, "I haven't had the opportunity to read many of my mother's books too, but now my mother is no longer looking at them as long as I understand the sad story behind those eyes. If I like to choose a book, I don't need money. Just promise to read it carefully. Thank you," and choose an old book about adventure stories. That night, after holding him books and start reading, although many difficult words, she still patiently examined the old dictionary. The owner lended him feels every page of the book, like opening up a new world where he can temporarily forget the harsh reality. Gradually south, and the bookseller became close to the old man. Tells men about the books were life lessons she has conclusively concluded over the years of seeing Nam's desire to teach him breaking lessons from writing to basic calculus. Mail absorbs very quickly, eyes light up whenever he understands something new. His one the smart kid, he said, "Don't let the circumstances make me forget that, but life is never easy." One night, as Mail is preparing to close a group of thugs, appearing to break and demand huge money to protect them, terribly, that both the boss and the Mail are trembling. But when they see them trying to hit the Mail boss uncontrollably, he rushes to use his body to shield him, even though he is hurting him by the sick thugs still not leaving his action, causing a nearby citizen to call the police and thugs to quickly get the boss, touching with the courage of a child with a big heart. They said, "From now on I will help you more than not only raise Mail's salary, but also encourage him to learn more with the man who both adults see in South. A potential that he himself has not realized, that the city is still cold and cruel to people like South, but he begins to learn to survive and rise from his little lessons from the help of the man's owner, who gradually grows up. He's no longer a boy trembling because of hunger any day. In his heart, small was lit up smoothly but strongly the flame of determination to change the fate of South, walking through the difficult days with a resilient heart and the will never subdue. Every morning he woke earlier than everyone to clean up the small work before guests arrive. When the Southeast restaurant all over with washing the dishes, but always keeping the smile on the lips of the evening. After closing the shop, he stopped by the old bookseller and studied himself under the golden lights, climbing behind the kitchen with the man. The words of each book, like small bricks, silently build a new foundation for his life's life, but also give men the rays of hope. One day, while Mail was washing a luxurious man into the bar, he not only came to eat, but stopped to chat with the owner while waiting for the gaze of Mr. Da. Wade, accidentally encountering the little boy's face, Das lights an erection when he saw him as both making and bowing his head, reading an old book placed on the kitchen counter. Surprised, "I read something," he asked, a warm but filled voice of Nam to startled my head up and answer hesitantly. "Did I read books to calculate? I want better to get a job, better than the man who stared at him for a while and turned to the owner of the restaurant, asking about the situation of the man who knew the story of his filled man, and then pulled out a card put into the Mail's hand. "If I want to change my life, come to see uncle who can help me learn a career as long as I'm really determined." Nam holds the card in hand with emotional eyes, thanked him in heart for offering a new hope. Mail don't hesitate. After a week of thinking, he decided to find the address on the business card. It is a vocational land center owned by the man here. Mail learned to repair electronic equipment. Initially, everything was difficult. Mail not used to complex machines, often mocked by friends because of poor origin, but it did not let those words melt away from him. "Always remember the words she once said," the bookseller told the gentleman. "Min is not the one who never fails, but the one who always stands soup after failure every day." Male spends twice as much time studying and practicing while resting friend. She still sits with the unassembled circuit boards until everything works smoothly, and the male's determination not only helps him progress quickly, but also makes the teachers in the center congratulate a year later. Molly graduated course with outstanding achievements. The man who helped him again give him a new job at the big repair workshop in the city eye. The early days of working at the NAM factory faced many difficult veteran colleagues often expressed contempt that he was merely a seasonal child who did not deserve that position. But NAM never complained or argued. He proved his ability by gradually acting on the achievements she achieved, made people change the way from a new NAM employee, quickly became one of the best in the workshop assigned to important projects. But NAM did not stop at that. Every night after tanning, he spent time studying more through books and technical documents. She realized that to really succeed, he needed to go further than the current job and idea of starting to group in the head of NAM. He wanted to open a private repair facility where not only repair but also vocational for young people like himself. In the old days, with the money accumulated from the years of his work, Male began his startup plan to hire as Mond on his own decoration and arrange everything their repair facility that generated simple but full life. The initial enthusiasm of customers are just the people around the neighborhood, but thanks to the solid skill and dedicated attitude of the Male's base, gradually famous peoples praise each other about the young master who is both good at the profession and always willing to help the difficult circumstances. NAM also does not forget the promise to give himself the opportunity for the less fortunate. He opens free vocational class for poor young people to learn a profession to make a living for themselves. Many of them later become good workers, even opening his own facility to see images my old time in that student. And that makes him feel that what I do really means success. Begins to smile at the Male repair facility, increasingly developing customers and more branches to hire more workers and expand activities to other areas, such as installing smart home design electrical systems. But amid those achievements, NAM still keeps himself simple lifestyle. He does not forget the positive days, nor forget those who helped him overcome the difficult period, especially one evening when NAM sat alone in the small office looking back on the journey he had traveled through him, feeling in his heart offering a strange feeling. He couldn't help but think about where he went to the small village where he was kicked out of his house on the night of 30th. The wondered if the people there, especially the pupil, he had ever thought of him. But then he put that thought aside with the Male important thing that he had got up and built his own life. He promised himself to continue trying to helping more people, as she had been helped a busy late afternoon in the office with a dense schedule at the repair facility was stable, and he was preparing to expand a new branch. Ringing up, NAM receiving a call from the former branch manager that said there was an elderly guest standing in front of the main branch door, asking him initially to meet them, that it was just a guest need help. But when he heard the manager better describe his heart, suddenly he said his name was middle appearance as his uncle Male silent man. That name recalled painful memories he had tried to bury for years. Asher remembered printing the picture of the man who pushed him out of the house on the night of 30 cold New Year's. So he wandered in the middle of his life when he was only 12 years old. He took a deep breath, struggled between the feeling of anger and the certainty after a few seconds, thinking that NAM decided to meet them. When NAM stepped out of the trunk sitting on an old wooden chair in the corner of the waiting room, he caught down silver clothes filled with dusty shoes to expose gray too. It's because the face price pushed his authority deeply with wrinkles of opaque eyes that no longer heard the sound of his footsteps, and realized that Male looked at each other insolence of time as if he had stopped drifting a complex flow of emotions, and the image of a shivering 12-year-old boy standing in front of the door on New Year's Eve appeared to be woven but in front of him. Now the man is no longer aggressive appearance imposed us old in the is only a man who is exhausted, lonely, and helplessly unclean, has not met NAM with a calm voice, but does not hide the coldness of Trung, looking at South fearful eyes, and apologized to him. Owing his stone of tough ton, NAM Munkle came to apologize to him. What to say now? It is late, but Hurley regret has wrong, so many mensolently he had not answered, just pulled down the seat opposite. Mr. Trung continued to say, the thin hands clasped together. He did not think that life was cruel to him like this after his mother's death. I thought that raising more children was only a heavy burden, but I'd not expect to push you into such a difficult path. Wrist stopped, the eye water flowing on the wrinkled cheek mound. Now I have nothing left, the failed business of debt, failing husbanding, broken family, hadn't nowhere to cling. When I heard that, then gathered the courage to come here, not to beg for pity, but apologize to the Male, quietly observing the man in his heart, their resentment that had grown up as a fire for many years, But now seeing Trung in his urinary form, he realized that whether retaliatory or hate the past could not change. The only thing he could do was choose Yuan's way of life. Inhaled a deeply calm but tough voice. Heck knew not that night 30 Tet that year when he came out of his uncle's house swore that he would never let anyone else see his love again. Those wandering years. I used to think that all his suffering was caused by him, but then I realized instead of living forever and had need to go beyond all that brought me to this day. Trung bowed my head not to raise my south, continuing, I will help you, but not because of the friendship, but because I don't want to live with resentment. If I help you, I'll probably find peace in my heart. Nam stands up and calls the manager to ask them to help find a place to live and pay for the temporary living expenses for Common. Uncle Heelzo arranged for him to get medical examination and treatment. But Nam does not promise anything further than I did. Part of I left because he decided to see Trung looking at Nam tears again. Hadn't know what to say, just uttered in choking. Thank you. When he left, Nam sitting back in the office looking through the window. Outside, the confirmation branches shaking, rent the east wind. Hadn't know if he felt relieved or empty. But he knew something. He chose to forgive, not because he shared, but because he himself was the only way he went. And without being fiercely past that year for the first time in more than 20 years, back to the small village where he once grew up. Everything seemed to change. Many of the small terrain roads squiggling the collapsed roofs that were located closely, and the gloomy atmosphere of a poor village in the middle of winter. But with Mail feeling different, England was no longer a 12-year-old boy trembling on the cold night, but a stable adult man. And then Dan returned, not a face the past, but a gratitude where it was the beginning of his thorny journey. Nam stopped, sat. He old house where the Trung house was the hour. This was sold to another family of old bamboo gates, which day was replaced by iron gates. But the corner of the yard where Nam used to sit while scolded, still he stood quietly for a while to recover and turn. His next stop was a small school located at the top of the village, where he decided to build to help the children in the village have better chance of learning. Kam Trang School with the elementary school sign hope brightly in the sunlight. South entering the campus to the children running on the courtyard, the laugh. Terecho everywhere, the teachers welcomed him with a warm smile, thanking him for building this school. But man only shook his head, smiling. I only do what I should do. Hope that the kids here won't have to go through what I spent that afternoon. Man spent time talking with the students. A thin boy who approached him hesitantly asked him, is it true that he didn't have a home? Nam nodded his head on the shoulder of the boy and told his story, not to provoke the feeling that let them understand that, no matter where they begin, without giving up, anyone can rise. To the eager eyes of their cheerful rangings filled the heart of Mail with emotion. Seeing which the image of him once a boy longing for opportunity and understanding that night. Nam returned to the town near the village where Uncle Trung is now in the clean room for him with the necessary items. When Nam stepped into the table slowly sipping at the tea, he raised up to see Nam. Doubles. Fake eyes. Suddenly I came here to do what I got, enough help from me, and I don't deserve to forgive him, saying full voice. Food. Nan sit down opposite me with a calm eyes. I'm not here to talk about the past. It's over, and I just want you to know that forgiveness is not form, but because my grandson doesn't want to bring resentment or hatred because it doesn't help. Trung bowed down the wrinkles on his face more deeply. I'm wrong. If I can go back, I definitely won't treat him so, but I cannot return to answer only now. Is something we can change, you to live well the rest of my life and not to torment myself anymore. I don't hat Emmy uncle, just want us all to live gently. Nam's words so that Uncle Trung cried. He can't say anything more than just tears rolling along on the cheek mound. Standing up gently and laying one hand on his shoulder before leaving him, sitting quietly in the small room as she stepped out of the Nam building, looking up to the night sky of the stars sheet on high, making him remember that New Year's Eve when he stood alone in the cold midst of desire for a place to call home. Now realized that home is not a place but a sense of peace in his soul. And today, for the first time in many years, he really felt peaceful. The days after Nam continued his journey, but has still regularly contacted the manager to ask about the situation of Trung. And knowing that he could not fix the past, but at least they did the best it could to make it a lesson for both times passing. South focuses work in volunteer projects, but in the shadow of the people who helped him, never milling air. Later on the night of 30 Tet, South returns to the small village. He does not go a one Halid steam and brings gifts to poor households in the village. When the bright fireworks in the south stand in the middle of the schoolyard, watching the radiant smiles of the children, he feels that all his efforts are all the pain I've suffered. Ered has meaning. Sitting under the old tree next to the schoolyard, Nam raised his head looking at the sky, smiling tonight. He's no longer alone, who he's helped those who trusted him and the lessons from the past that made him human today. Male whispered, "Thank you all for teaching me what was true life." And that night, between the light of fireworks and the laughter echoing over the village, really felt this journey had not stopped, but left his heart has found peace. He knows that the road ahead, whether difficult or challenging, he will walk with deep gratitude and a love. Inghart.